"No cake for fake grandkids," my dad sneered. My small daughter froze hurt. I was speechless, but then my husband stood slowly, raising his glass, declared, "Your family's betrayal now exposed." Their smiles vanished. This is it. The moment you realize that some wounds, no matter how deep, still have the power to absolutely shatter you, even when you thought you'd built an impenetrable shield around your heart. What would you do if the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally openly rejected your child to their face? The dining room, usually a haven of quiet meals, felt like a stage set for a terrible play. Eleanor had gone all out, transforming it with pink and gold balloons, streamers glittering under the chandelier. The table groaned beneath a feast: roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, rolls fresh from the oven. It looked straight out of a magazine, a picture of perfect domestic bliss. But I should have known. I always should have known better. Our daughter, Harper, sat between Ethan and me, her little legs swinging with an innocent rhythm beneath her chair. She was wearing the navy blue, polka-dot dress we'd picked out together, her hair in neat braids, practically bouncing with excitement about seeing her cousins. This was supposed to be a nice evening. Family time. Connection. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, had insisted we come, making multiple calls to confirm our attendance as if our presence was a rare, precious gift. Caleb, my younger brother, and his wife, Chloe, were already across from us, their twin boys, 7-year-old Leo and Noah, waging breadstick wars while Chloe feigned attempts at table manners. Ethan had actually questioned whether we should even show up. He'd seen the pattern before, the subtle, and not so subtle, ways my parents treated me differently. I'd brushed off his concerns, clinging to that sliver of desperate hope that things might finally be better. Hope is a strange, cruel thing. It pulls you back to the edge of the same cliff, even when every fiber of your being screams to walk away. Richard stood at the head of the table, a wine glass clutched in his hand. He cleared his throat, a performative flourish that demanded attention. Eleanor beamed, radiating pride, already preening for whatever speech he had prepared. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," Richard boomed, his voice echoing that practiced, authoritative tone from his corporate executive days. "Eleanor and I have been blessed with 2 wonderful sons, and now we're fortunate enough to watch our family grow." Caleb puffed out his chest, a self-satisfied grin spreading across his face. Leo and Noah, meanwhile, were too engrossed in their breadstick duel to notice. Harper looked up at me, her big brown eyes wide, a tiny cloud of confusion already forming on her small face. I squeezed her hand under the table, a silent promise. Richard continued, droning on about legacy, bloodlines, and the sanctity of family traditions. Every word felt like a deliberate jab, a calculated performance. He gestured grandly toward the cake Eleanor had commissioned, a towering, 3-tiered monstrosity, slathered in blue frosting, with "Celebrating Our Grandsons" written across it in elaborate script. It had been positioned prominently on the sideboard. I'd seen it when we arrived, a knot forming in my stomach, but I'd tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's just for Caleb's boys. Maybe there's another cake for Harper somewhere. There wasn't. Ethan's jaw tightened. I could feel the tension radiating off him in waves, a warning bell clanging in my ears. "Now," Richard announced, his smile widening as he looked directly at Caleb and Chloe, "let's celebrate the boys who will carry on our family name. The real next generation." Harper tugged on my sleeve, her voice a small, bewildered whisper. "Mommy, what about me?" The room suddenly felt suffocating, too small, too hot. Eleanor was already moving toward the cake, knife in hand, completely oblivious to, or pointedly ignoring, my daughter's question. "Richard," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice even, "Harper is sitting right here." He waved his hand dismissively. "She knows what I mean, sweetheart. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be." Caleb shifted uncomfortably, a silent acknowledgement, but he said nothing. Chloe busied herself wiping the twins' faces. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, his grip firm, grounding me when I felt like I might just float away on pure, incandescent rage. "Actually," I pressed, my voice gaining a steely edge, "I don't think any of us know what you mean." Could you explain? Eleanor cut in, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my teeth ache. Darling, you're being sensitive. Your father simply meant that biological grandchildren hold a special place. You understand, don't you? Harper was 5 years old. She understood rejection perfectly well, even if she couldn't articulate the crushing weight of what was happening. I watched her small shoulders hunch inward, saw the light dim in her eyes, felt the tremor in her tiny hand. We'd adopted Harper when she was 6 months old. The process had been lengthy, emotionally draining, but the moment they placed her in my arms, I'd known, with an absolute certainty that transcended genetics, that she was meant to be ours. Ethan had tears streaming down his face that day. We had both fallen completely, irrevocably in love. My parents had seemed supportive at first. They'd come to the finalization hearing, brought gifts, cooed over baby pictures. But as Harper grew, the comments started. Little digs about genetics, veiled questions about when we'd have our own children, endless comparisons between Harper and Caleb's biological sons. I had confronted them before. Each time, they'd acted wounded, misunderstood. They'd claim I was overreacting, reading too much into innocent statements. They'd accuse me of being defensive, difficult. But this was undeniable. This was a deliberate, public slap in the face. Come on, everyone. Eleanor chirped, gesturing everyone toward the cake, her voice unnervingly bright. Leo and Noah, come get the first pieces. The twins scrambled over, chocolate already smeared across their faces. Caleb and Chloe followed, accepting plates with strained, uncomfortable smiles. Harper remained frozen in her seat, a statue of wounded innocence. Richard picked up his wine glass again. A toast, he declared, his voice booming. To my grandsons, the boys who will carry our legacy forward. May they grow strong and make the family proud. That's when Ethan stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, every muscle in his body radiating controlled power. He picked up his water glass, he never drank alcohol, and raised it high. The entire room fell silent. Even Leo and Noah stopped their squabbling, eyes wide. Actually, Ethan said, his voice perfectly calm, cutting through the stunned silence. I'd like to make a toast of my own. Richard's smug expression instantly morphed into one of wary suspicion. Ethan looked around the table, making eye contact with each person, his gaze unwavering. A toast, he began, his voice laced with an understated intensity, to the family we choose. To the people who show up with love instead of conditions. To those who understand that blood means nothing without respect. Eleanor's hand flew to her chest. Ethan, that's completely uncalled for. He held up a single finger, silencing her. I'm not finished. You see, I've been documenting these little moments for the past 3 years. Every dismissive comment. Every time you've excluded Harper from family photos. Every birthday card you send to the real grandchildren while conveniently forgetting our daughter. Caleb's face went pale. Oh, and Eleanor, Ethan continued, his tone never wavering, I don't just have recordings. I have text messages, emails, voicemails, all time-stamped and saved in multiple locations, all showing a clear pattern of discrimination against a minor child. Eleanor sank into her chair, her bravado dissolving. You wouldn't dare. Ethan smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. It was a cold, hard, calculating smile. Wouldn't I? See, I work in legal compliance. I know exactly how family court judges view grandparents' rights cases, and I know how poorly they respond to documented evidence of emotional abuse. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of crimson. This is absurd. We have every right to feel how we feel about a 5-year-old child. I cut in, finally finding my voice. The anger that had been building for years, festering under a thin veneer of civility, suddenly crystallized into something sharp and useful. About an innocent little girl who's done nothing except exist? Ethan pulled out his phone. I've already consulted with an attorney. Would you like to hear what she said about your chances of maintaining any relationship with our daughter going forward? The room erupted. Eleanor started crying loudly, theatrically. Richard began blustering about rights and respect. Caleb tried to play peacemaker, a futile attempt, while Chloe gathered the twins and herded them toward the living room, sensing the coming storm. Through it all, Ethan stood firm, unyielding. "You have two choices," he stated, his voice ringing with absolute clarity. "You can apologize to Harper right now, sincerely, and commit to treating her as an equal member of this family going forward. Or you can never see her again. Your call." I had moved to Harper's side, placing a hand on her small back. She was staring at Ethan with something like awe on her face. My husband, my wonderful, protective, brilliant husband, had just gone to war for our daughter. "This is manipulation," Richard sputtered. "You can't seriously expect us to. Goodbye then," Ethan said simply. He picked up Harper, settling her on his hip. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. "We're leaving." I grabbed my purse, adrenaline flooding my system, a strange mix of terror and exhilarating freedom. We were halfway to the door when Eleanor's voice, raw and desperate, rang out. "Wait. Please wait." We turned. She was standing now, mascara running down her face in dark streaks. Richard stood behind her, his expression stormy, defeated. "We'll do better," Eleanor choked out, her voice cracking. "Please don't take her away. We'll apologize." Ethan looked at me. The decision, the weight of years of silent suffering and unspoken pain, was mine to make. I thought about all the times I'd excused their behavior. All the moments I'd convinced myself things weren't that bad. All the years I'd let my daughter experience the same gut-wrenching rejection I'd felt growing up whenever I didn't meet their impossible, ever-shifting standards. "Apologize to Harper," I said coldly. "Not to us. To her." They approached slowly, like condemned prisoners walking toward a firing squad. Richard crouched down to Harper's level, though she remained safe in Ethan's arms. "Harper," he began, and I could hear the immense effort it took him to get the words out. "I'm sorry for what I said. You are my grandchild." "I was wrong." Eleanor nodded frantically. "We love you so much, sweetheart. We're so sorry we hurt your feelings." Harper looked at them solemnly, her small face unreadable, then turned her head to Ethan. "Can we go home now, Daddy?" Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, princess. We can go home." We left without another word. The drive home was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the engine. Harper fell asleep in her car seat almost immediately, exhausted from the emotional upheaval. Ethan and I didn't speak until we carried her inside and tucked her into bed. In our own room, I finally broke down. Ethan held me while I sobbed against his chest, years of frustration and hurt pouring out of me. "I should have done something sooner," I gasped between tears. "I should have protected her better." "Hey," Ethan said softly, tilting my face up to look at him. "You have been protecting her. You've been fighting this battle for years. Tonight was just the first time they couldn't pretend not to see it." I wiped my eyes. "That speech. When did you plan that?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a folder. It was full of screenshots, recordings, documented incidents. The level of detail was staggering, meticulous. "I've been collecting evidence since the first Christmas, when they gave me a gift card while the twins got actual presents. I knew eventually we'd need it." I scrolled through the files, my stomach twisting with each entry. There were screenshots of text messages from Eleanor asking if we were planning to have biological children soon. Voice recordings from last Thanksgiving when Richard had commented loudly that Leo and Noah had the family nose, while glancing dismissively at Harper. Photos from Easter where my parents had coordinated matching outfits for the twins, but conveniently forgotten to include Harper in the plans. "Ethan, this is years' worth of documentation," I whispered, stunned by the sheer volume. 2 years and 4 months, he confirmed. I started keeping records after that incident at the zoo. I remembered that day viscerally. We'd all gone together, my parents, Caleb's family, and us. The twins had begged to ride the carousel, and Richard had handed them each a $20 bill for tickets and souvenirs. Harper had reached up expectantly, her small hand outstretched, but he had already turned away. The rejection on her 2-year-old face had shattered something inside me. "You never told me you were doing this," I said, still processing. Ethan sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in his. "I didn't want to make things worse between you and your parents unless absolutely necessary." I kept hoping they'd change on their own. But I also needed insurance. Something concrete if the situation escalated. Tonight proved I was right to prepare. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake replaying the evening, analyzing every agonizing moment. Part of me felt guilty for the confrontation. These were my parents, the people who'd raised me, who had been there for every milestone of my own childhood. But another part, the fiercely protective mother part, burned with righteous fury at how they treated my daughter. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up and checked on Harper. She was curled around her stuffed elephant, peaceful in sleep. I brushed her hair back gently, studying her features. She had my smile, people said, though there was no genetic connection. She'd simply learned it from watching me. Her laugh was entirely her own, bright and infectious. Her curiosity about the world reminded me of Ethan's analytical mind. She was ours in every way that mattered. I thought about my own childhood, growing up as the oldest and only daughter. Caleb had always been the golden child, the son Richard had wanted to mold in his image. I'd spent years trying to earn the same approval, the same unconditional pride. Even now, at 32 years old, I could feel that desperate need for validation lurking beneath my anger. But Harper wouldn't grow up like that. I'd make sure of it. The next morning arrived too soon. Harper woke up subdued, quieter than usual. She picked at her breakfast, blueberry pancakes that were normally her favorite, and didn't ask about seeing her cousins like she typically did on weekends. "Hey, Bug," I said softly, using Ethan's nickname for her. "Are you okay?" She shrugged, pushing a blueberry around her plate with her fork. "Grandpa doesn't like me." The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan's jaw tightened, and I saw him grip the edge of the counter. "That's not true," I started, but Harper interrupted. "He said the cake was for real grandkids." "I'm not a real grandkid." Her voice was matter-of-fact, which somehow made it worse. She'd accepted it as truth. Ethan crouched down beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Listen to me, Harper. You are absolutely a real grandkid. Grandpa said something very wrong last night, and that's why we left. He made a mistake, a big one. But I'm adopted," Harper said, the word careful in her mouth. "That means I didn't come from Mommy's tummy like Leo and Noah came from Aunt Chloe's." We'd always been honest with Harper about her adoption. We'd read her age-appropriate books about different family structures and celebrated her adoption day every year alongside her birthday. But hearing her use it as evidence of why she was less than her cousins made my heart crack. "You're right. You grew in a different mommy's tummy," I said, kneeling beside Ethan. "But you grew in my heart from the very first moment I saw you. That makes you just as much my daughter as if I carried you myself." "Then why doesn't Grandpa think so?" It was a fair question, one I didn't have a good answer for. How do you explain prejudice to a 5-year-old? How do you help them understand that sometimes people's limitations have nothing to do with the child's worth? "Sometimes grown-ups have wrong ideas in their heads," Ethan explained, his voice gentle. "And those wrong ideas make them say hurtful things. But Daddy's not going to let anyone hurt you like that, okay? Not even Grandpa." Harper nodded slowly, then returned to her pancakes with slightly more interest. Kids are resilient in ways that constantly amaze me, bouncing back from wounds that would permanently scar adults. After breakfast, my phone started buzzing. I'd left it in the bedroom deliberately, wanting to focus on Harper first, but eventually, I had to face the fallout. Caleb called first, apologizing for not speaking up. He admitted he'd noticed the differential treatment but hadn't wanted to cause waves. Chloe sent a long text about how uncomfortable she'd felt, but didn't know how to address it. Caleb's call came while I was still staring at the screen, trying to process everything. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately. "I should have said something years ago. I didn't want to believe Mom and Dad were actually doing what it looked like they were doing." "But you saw it," I said flatly, the residual anger bubbling up. "You knew. And you stayed quiet." "Yeah." He exhaled heavily. "I was a coward. Chloe's been on my case about it for months. She wanted me to talk to them, but I kept making excuses. Kept telling myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. It was worse, Caleb. It was so much worse." My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay composed. Do you have any idea what it's like watching your child realize she's not wanted? Not valued? I can't imagine, he said quietly. But I saw Harper's face last night. I saw what Dad's comment did to her. There's no excuse for my silence. I wanted to be angrier with him, but exhaustion dulled the edge. Chloe's text was longer and more detailed. She described specific incidents I hadn't even noticed. Times when Eleanor had deliberately positioned Leo and Noah in the center of family photos while nudging Harper to the edge. Moments when Richard had asked the twins about their interests and ambitions while barely acknowledging Harper's presence. Gift-giving occasions where the disparity in thought and expense was glaring. I wanted to say something so many times, Chloe had written, but Caleb kept saying it wasn't our place. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder. Harper deserves better, and you deserve better. My parents' messages were far more complicated. Eleanor sent a series of increasingly desperate texts about how they'd been misunderstood. Richard left a voicemail that started defensive and gradually shifted towards something resembling genuine remorse. You have to understand, Eleanor's first text read, "We never meant to hurt Harper. We love her. We've always loved her." The second came 10 minutes later. "Your father didn't mean what it sounded like. He was just trying to acknowledge Caleb's boys. You're being too sensitive about this." The third, another 15 minutes after that. "Please call me. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just cut us off over a misunderstanding." By the eighth text, the tone had shifted entirely. "I've been crying all night. Your father is devastated. We don't understand why you're punishing us like this. All we wanted was a nice family dinner." Richard's voicemail was harder to listen to. His voice had that quality it always got when he'd been drinking, slightly slurred, more emotional than usual. "I don't appreciate how you and Ethan embarrassed us in front of the family," he began. "We opened our home to you, prepared a meal, tried to do something special, and you threw it back in our faces. That's not how we raised you." There was a long pause, the clinking sound of ice in a glass. "But maybe I could have worded things better, with the cake and everything. I didn't think about how it might sound to Harper. She's a good kid, you know. I think she's a good kid. I just..." Another pause. "Call me back. Let's talk about this." I played the voicemail for Ethan later that afternoon. He listened without expression, then handed the phone back. "Classic non-apology," he said. "Notice how he focuses on his feelings, his embarrassment, his intent. Nothing about the actual harm caused." He admitted he could have worded things better, I pointed out, though even as I said it, I knew it was inadequate. Yeah, he could have worded things better. Not, "I was wrong." Not, "I hurt my granddaughter." Not, "I've been treating Harper differently, and that's unacceptable." Ethan shook his head. He's sorry he got called out, not sorry for what he did. Deep down, I knew he was right. This was the pattern I'd seen my entire life. My father making mistakes, offering the bare minimum acknowledgement, then expecting everyone to move on without any real change or accountability. Over the next few days, I watched more messages accumulate. My Aunt Sarah, Eleanor's sister, sent a lengthy email describing her own observations of the family dynamics. She'd noticed the favoritism, too, but had assumed I was handling it privately. She offered to mediate if needed, though she acknowledged she should have intervened sooner. Several family friends reached out, having apparently heard about the incident through the grapevine. Some offered support. Others suggested I was overreacting, that family disagreements should stay private, that I was damaging Harper by creating conflict. Those messages stung in a different way. The implication that protecting my daughter from emotional harm was somehow more damaging than allowing the harm to continue made me furious. People always want to protect the status quo, Ethan observed when I showed him some of the responses. It's easier to pressure the victim to accept mistreatment than to pressure the perpetrator to change. Harper, meanwhile, seemed to process the evening in her own way. She played more quietly than usual, spent longer periods drawing in her sketchbook. When I asked what she was drawing, she showed me pictures of our immediate family, her, Ethan, and me, surrounded by hearts and flowers. "This is my real family," she said simply. The statement broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. She found her security in US, which was exactly what should happen. But I hated that she needed to make that distinction. Needed to separate real family from the extended relatives who'd failed her so spectacularly. A week passed before I finally responded to any of my parents' messages. I called Eleanor on a Tuesday morning after Ethan had taken Harper to kindergarten. Thank goodness. Eleanor answered on the first ring, her voice tight with relief. I've been so worried. Your father and I have barely slept. I needed time to think, I said carefully. Time to figure out what comes next. What comes next is you forgive us for this silly misunderstanding and we move forward, she said, that familiar edge of desperation creeping into her voice. We're a family. Family forgives each other. Eleanor, this wasn't a misunderstanding. Richard explicitly said the cake was for the real grandkids. There's no ambiguity there. He didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then how did he mean it? I pressed, my voice rising. Because from where Harper was sitting, from where I was sitting, it sounded like he was saying she doesn't count as a real member of this family. Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, could almost see her struggling to find the right words that would make this go away without requiring actual accountability. Your father struggles with the adoption, she finally admitted, her voice low. He's old-fashioned. He believes in bloodlines and genetics. I've tried to tell him it doesn't matter, but you know how stubborn he is. So, you've known this entire time that he has a problem with Harper being adopted, and you did nothing? I did do something. I've been working on him, trying to change his mind. These things take time. Harper doesn't have time, Eleanor. She's 5 years old. Every day she experiences this rejection is another day of damage to her sense of self-worth. I was pacing now, unable to sit still. And you've been enabling him, making excuses, asking me to be patient while my daughter suffers. That's not fair. Eleanor protested. I love Harper. I've always tried to include her. Trying isn't enough. Either she's your granddaughter or she isn't. There's no middle ground here. More silence. Then, quietly, what do you want from us? It was the first real question she'd asked. The first indication that she understood something fundamental needed to change. I want you and Richard to go to therapy, I said, my voice firm. Individual and couples therapy with someone who specializes in adoption issues and family dynamics. I want you to confront your biases and figure out why you've been treating Harper differently. Therapy? That seems extreme. What's extreme is telling a 5-year-old she's not a real grandchild. I shot back, my voice vibrating with frustration. What's extreme is years of documented favoritism. What's extreme is making my daughter feel unwanted in her own family. We never meant. Intent doesn't matter, Eleanor. Impact does. And the impact has been devastating. I took a breath, steeling myself. If you want any relationship with Harper going forward, you'll do the therapy, both of you. Non-negotiable. I'll talk to your father, she said finally, sounding utterly defeated. But I can't promise he'll agree. Then I guess he won't see his granddaughter anymore, I replied, the words feeling heavy but necessary. His choice. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, processing the conversation. Part of me felt guilty for issuing ultimatums. Another part felt empowered for finally drawing a firm boundary, for protecting my child fiercely. Ethan found me there when he returned from dropping off Harper. He didn't ask what happened. He just made tea and sat beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. I told them they need therapy or they don't see Harper, I said eventually. Good, Ethan replied simply. Is it though? Am I being too harsh? He turned to face me fully. Think about what you're really asking. You're asking them to examine their behavior and commit to change. That's not harsh. That's the bare minimum requirement for being in Harper's life. But they're my parents. And Harper is your daughter. She comes first, always. He squeezed my hand. Besides, therapy isn't punishment. It's an opportunity for them to actually fix this, to build something healthier. You're giving them a chance. 3 days later, Eleanor called back. We've scheduled appointments, she said, sounding tired. Your father wasn't happy about it, but he's agreed to go. I didn't respond to any of them immediately. Instead, Ethan and I took Harper out for pancakes at her favorite diner. We let her order chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream. We played silly games and made her laugh. We reminded her that she was loved completely and unconditionally. Over the following weeks, my parents tried various approaches to repair the damage. They sent gifts, which we returned. They showed up at our house unannounced, which resulted in Ethan politely, but firmly turning them away. They called mutual family members to plead their case, which backfired spectacularly when several relatives admitted they'd noticed the favoritism, too. Finally, 6 weeks after the disastrous dinner, they requested a formal meeting with a family therapist present. Ethan and I discussed it extensively before agreeing. The therapy sessions with Dr. Evelyn Reed were brutal. Dr. Reed didn't let anyone off easy. She made my parents articulate exactly what they'd done wrong and why it was harmful. She made them confront their biases about adoption and biological versus chosen family. She held up a mirror to their behavior, and they didn't like what they saw. But slowly, painstakingly, things began to shift. It started with the letter Richard wrote to Harper. He didn't make excuses. He acknowledged that he'd hurt her and explained that he was working to change. He told her that she deserved better from her grandparents. Eleanor followed with her own letter, along with a photo album. She'd gone through years of pictures and created a book just for Harper, full of moments they'd shared: swimming lessons, zoo trips, art projects, evidence that love had existed even when they'd struggled so profoundly to express it properly. Dr. Reed helped us establish clear boundaries. My parents weren't allowed unsupervised time with Harper until they completed at least 12 sessions. All interactions would be documented and discussed in therapy. They had to actively work to treat all their grandchildren equally, with specific examples and check-ins. The first supervised visit happened at a neutral location, a park playground, where Harper could escape to the swings if things got uncomfortable. My parents brought a picnic and sat awkwardly on a blanket while Mia eyed them with suspicion. "I brought your favorite cookies," Eleanor offered tentatively. "The oatmeal ones with raisins." Harper climbed onto the swing instead. Ethan gave her a push while I stayed close to my parents, ready to intervene if necessary. Richard cleared his throat. "Your mother told me you're learning to read now." "That's wonderful. I can read chapter books," Harper announced, her voice carrying across the playground. "Daddy reads me one every night before bed." "Maybe Grandpa could read you one sometime," Eleanor suggested, her voice soft. "If that would be okay with you." Harper considered this, pumping her legs to swing higher, higher. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Caleb and Chloe made their own efforts to bridge the gap. They started including Harper in the twins' birthday celebrations. Chloe sent me thoughtful messages, checking in on how we were doing. Caleb even pulled Richard aside during one family gathering and told him point blank that the favoritism needed to end, permanently. The real turning point came 4 months later at Harper's 6th birthday party. We'd kept it small, just close friends and immediate family. Richard and Eleanor arrived early, carrying an elaborately wrapped present. Harper opened it carefully, pulling out a beautiful necklace with a small pendant shaped like a heart. Inside was a tiny picture of our entire family, including her prominently in the center. "We had it custom-made," Richard said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because you're the heart of our family, Harper. We forgot that for a while, but we won't forget again." Harper looked at the necklace, then at her grandparents. Something shifted in her expression, a cautious softening. "Thank you," she said quietly. Later, while Harper played with her friends, Eleanor pulled me aside. "I know we have so much more work to do," she said, her eyes earnest. "I know you have every right to never trust us again. But I want you to know I see it now. The damage we caused, the pain we inflicted. I didn't make it easy for her. Words are simple, Eleanor. Consistency is what matters." "I know," she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. "Which is why I'm asking you to hold us accountable. If we slip, if we fall back into old patterns, I want you to call us out immediately. No more excuses, no more defensiveness." Over the next year, they proved their commitment. They showed up to Harper's dance recital with the same enthusiasm they brought to the twins' baseball games. They sent birthday cards to all 3 grandchildren with equal care and attention. They stopped making comments about biology and genetics. Most importantly, they listened when Harper talked. They asked about her day, her friends, her dreams. They treated her like she mattered, because she did. The relationship between my parents and our family would never be exactly what I'd once hoped for. Trust, once broken that completely, leaves scars. But we built something new on the ruins of what had been destroyed. Something more honest, more intentional, and ultimately, stronger. Ethan never deleted the evidence he'd collected. He kept it stored securely, just in case. But as months turned into years, we needed it less and less. Harper grew from a cautious 6-year-old into a confident, vibrant 8-year-old who knew her worth. She understood that family was defined by love and action, not just blood. She recognized that people could change if they were willing to do the hard work. And she knew, without question, that her parents would always protect her. On Harper's 8th birthday, we had another family celebration. This time, when Eleanor brought out the cake, it read, "Happy Birthday, Harper," in bright purple frosting, her favorite color. The design featured butterflies and flowers, all the things Harper loved. Richard raised his glass for a toast. "To Harper," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "Our beautiful, smart, incredible granddaughter. May this year bring you joy and adventure." Harper grinned, her whole face lighting up. "Thanks, Grandpa." I squeezed Ethan's hand under the table, a silent communication that spoke volumes. I looked at my husband, this man who'd stood up when it mattered most, who'd refused to let our daughter be diminished. Sometimes love means fighting. Sometimes it means drawing hard lines and enforcing boundaries. Sometimes it means being willing to walk away completely. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it means watching people choose to change because they realize what they stand to lose. The cake was delicious. Everyone agreed. But the sweetest part wasn't the frosting or the filling. It was watching my daughter celebrate, surrounded by people who finally, genuinely saw her for the gift she was. She'd always been the real grandkid. She'd always been enough. It had just taken far too long for some people to recognize the truth that Ethan and I had known from the moment we first held her. Family isn't about genetics. It's about showing up. It's about fighting for each other. It's about refusing to accept anything less than complete, unconditional love. That night, after the party ended and the guests went home, Harper came into our room wearing her favorite pajamas. "Daddy, Mommy," she said softly. We both looked up. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked. She climbed onto the bed between us, snuggling close. "Thank you for always picking me." Ethan and I exchanged glances over her head, both fighting back tears. "Always," Ethan promised, kissing her forehead. "Every single time." "Forever," I added, wrapping my arms around them both. Because that's what real family does. They choose each other every day, no matter what. They protect each other. They fight for each other. And they never, ever let anyone make their loved ones feel less than they are. The cake had been for all the grandkids that night. But the real celebration was watching my daughter finally feel what she'd always deserved, completely and unquestionably loved. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect someone you love? What happened? Share your story in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.